fun guest coming up right now. This is a guy who I covered in high school with the Mainland Mustangs, and of course a state championship season they had. Then he went to William and Mary, played football for the Tribe, and got to that fork in the road where he said, I'd really like to pursue a career in the National Football League, and those jobs just aren't handed out. And yet here he is off a couple of years of working as a scout for the Indianapolis Colts and now a scouting assistant for the Washington Redskins. That's Brent Caprio, and he joins us now on the program. Brent, how are you, buddy?
I'm doing well, Pete. Thanks for having me on.
Thrilled to have you on. Thrilled to run into you the other night after the Who concert as we were going through your pop's work there, and both had grins on our faces. Now, Mike Gill asked me this question: do you drink? He said, I don't think Brent drinks. And I said, I don't know.
Oh, no, only on days that end in Y, Pete.
You and I have something in common. That's what I like to hear. So let's get into this a little bit about your path, because I hinted at it a minute ago, and I do remember talking to your dad about, and you, quite frankly, about that crossroads that you reached where, you get out of William & Mary and there's some jobs in finance, and that was your degree. You had a Bachelor in Business Administration, Accounting and Finance, and then you even went and got the one on top of it, the Masters of Accounting and Finance. So clearly numbers are your thing, and running numbers are your thing, and finance is your thing, and there were jobs that you could go into that area, but the lure of the National Football League pulled you away. How did you end up with the Colts? Tell us that part of the story first.
So after college, I did an internship with Indianapolis prior to the 2014 season. My connection with the Colts, my college quarterback coach and offensive coordinator, a guy by the name of Kevin Rogers, his son is with the Colts organization, and he's their director of pro personnel. So he was my connection in Indianapolis. Got an interview, parlayed that into a full-time job about 9 months later, prior to the 2015 season, and then was with the Colts for the last 2 years. Obviously, we underachieved a little bit in Indianapolis, and some people were let go, and I found myself with the Washington Redskins, which is actually the team that my dad grew up rooting for and the team that I grew up rooting for. So it's come full circle. It's pretty cool to be back in the Virginia area where a lot of my college teammates live. I have some family in this area, and I'm working for a team that I grew up rooting for. So it's pretty cool. It's all come full circle.
There was a time not that long ago I was in the Eagles press box and a gentleman walks by me and I'm thinking man, that guy looks familiar. And I just couldn't place him. And for some reason I was struggling, and somebody else elbowed me and said, duh, that's Doug Williams, you idiot. You're working for Doug Williams, Brent.
Yep, I'm working for Doug Williams. It's awesome. Doug's a great guy. He's very personable, doesn't have an ego. He's awesome to work with thus far, and I'm really looking forward to learning a lot from him and getting the Redskins back on the right path. They've had some winning seasons here the past couple seasons, and we're hoping we can keep that going and even take it a step further.
Hey, Brent, this is Josh. I wanted to ask you, you look at how far you've come. You were a guy, you were a part of that Mainland team that went 12-0, won the South Jersey sectional title. I mean, you guys outscored opponents 472 to 87 in 2008. It was a great team. You go to college, you go through that whole experience, and now you're in an NFL front office. At what point along the way did you start transitioning your mindset from being a player to being a guy who evaluates players?
It wasn't easy. There was definitely a learning curve because you get so used to doing things the way that you do them in college, where you're preparing for the next opponent. And this is something that Ryan Grigson was the guy that hired me in Indianapolis, and this was something that he said he likes to have quarterbacks turn scouts because you look at the game a different way than most other positions. As a quarterback, you got to know your whole offense, what every position's doing offensively, and then you got to be able to look at defenses and digest what's going on defensively with coverages and fronts and different things like that. So he said that he always likes to have young quarterbacks that he's able to groom to become scouts. He thinks that they look at the game a different way than most other people that have a background in football. So there was a learning curve. It took me some time to be able to evaluate certain positions. I maybe wasn't as used to watching offensive linemen as closely as you have to when you're evaluating guys like that. Some of the defensive line stuff, I maybe wasn't as used to watching those guys that closely. But I think I've learned a ton over the past 2 years, and there's always room to grow and learn. And I'm looking forward to being with a new organization this year and learning the way that they do things. And there's 100 different ways to skin a cat. There's teams that do things a little bit differently. So I'm looking forward to learning the whole process here in Washington and continuing to grow.
There's a big transition for you going from the Colts to the Redskins, and obviously it has to do with the man up top. Grigson, he didn't come from the same kind of background as Doug Williams. Grigson, he was a scout that became a general manager. Before that, he was not a quarterback like Doug Williams was, whereas Williams played quarterback at multiple levels and then in the Super Bowl. Talk about the relationship that you have with the different types of people above you and how those relationships help you do your job.
I think it's important to be able to develop strong relationships with people and just to learn something from everybody. Like I kind of mentioned before, everybody does things different ways. There's different ways to evaluate guys. There's different ways to write reports when you're evaluating guys. So just to be able to become comfortable with people and learn the way that they came up and how they learned scouting and maybe take something from each person's repertoire and add it into my own. That was something that I learned as a quarterback in college. I used to watch pro film and, one of my college coaches taught me to watch these pro quarterbacks and try and take something from their game and make it your own. And I think the same thing goes for scouting. You read other people's reports, how they write, how they present, how they watch film, just their day-to-day process. I think that there's something that can be learned from that, good or bad. You learn the things that work really well, and you learn the things that maybe don't work so well, and you're able to apply that to yourself. So, I'm really looking forward to working with a new group of guys here in Washington. And, I'm certainly going to miss some of the guys that I developed strong relationships with in Indianapolis. And so I'm still rooting for the Colts. I'm still hoping that, some of my guys that are still there in Indianapolis have a good season, but it's a little easier to do that when you're over in the NFC now. You're out of the AFC. It makes that a little bit easier.
Brent Caprio with us, former Mainland quarterback, William & Mary quarterback, a scout for the Indianapolis Colts, and now a scouting assistant for the Washington Redskins. And I'll ask you, Brent, on the air what I asked you off the air, which is, I think I texted you, so what exactly do you do? Because I'm sure that's like the number one question that people ask you. First they say what team you're working for and have their reaction, and then, well, what does that mean? Like, what do you do?
So as a scouting assistant, I help out with both the pro side of scouting and the college side of scouting. The pro side is mostly this time of year, you're evaluating teams' 90-man rosters to see if there's anybody that you think are going to get cut that could help your team when they cut down from 90-man rosters to 53-man rosters. That kind of sets the groundwork for a lot of free agent workouts that you'll have throughout the season. A lot of teams tinker with the back end of their roster. Those spots 53 through 50, those guys are kind of interchangeable. The practice squad. This is a good time on the pro side to evaluate a lot of back end roster guys and young guys that are coming up that are, years 1, 2, 3 in the league that are still trying to find a team and settle in. So I help out a great amount with the pro side of scouting. And then on the college side, I'll do some local college visits in the Virginia area. I'll help out at the combine. I'll help out with pro days in the spring, and I'll be in draft meetings and help out with the whole draft process of stacking the board and getting ready for the draft, and which is a long time away right now, but the process is starting to begin with evaluating those college guys already. So it's a little bit mixture of both, and it's good to kind of develop that foundation and be able to move in one direction or the other, whether I want to whether I want to go into pro scouting or college scouting has yet to be determined. But I'm developing a good foundation in both, so I'm excited about that.
Now, you hinted at this a little bit earlier. You said your dad was a little bit of a fan. Of course, those Redskins teams in the 80s and the Hogs and what Joe Gibbs was able to do and Joe Theismann back in the day. And I can remember him because, hey, that was the Eagles' main rival. So, I know, the Art Monks of the world and John Rigginses of the world and all those kind of names that go through Washington Redskins history. It's really no surprise, though, that Washington has not necessarily had those glory years, have been able to repeat those glory years. I guess my question to you, though, is since you grew up in South Jersey, went to Mainland, you're right in the area, what have your friends and other people's reactions been when you said, what team are you going to work for this year? Redskins. What? Like, what's their reaction been?
I mean, it was tough growing up being a Redskins fan because my dad had it easy in the 80s and early 90s when the Redskins were good, but most of my whole life, the Redskins were terrible, and this was back early 2000s when the Eagles were going to the NFC Championship or the Super Bowl every year, and so it wasn't easy always being a Redskins fan. And obviously, a ton of people in our area, have Philadelphia affiliations and root for the Philadelphia sports teams. And I have a couple buddies that I've made throughout the league that are in Philadelphia now, so. It'll be interesting. I mean, people say, I'm rooting for you every time you play, except for when you're playing Philly twice a year. People say, I hope you guys do all right, but not too great. So I get a mixed bag of reactions, but people want me to do well on a personal level, but maybe they don't want the Redskins to do well on a greater level. So it's funny, the responses I'll get when I tell people I'm, back in the NFC East.
We're talking with Brent Caprio. He was on the 12-0 Mainland Mustangs team that won the South Jersey Section 4 title back in 2008. Now he's working for the Redskins. Brent, you mentioned the Eagles. Carson Wentz, he's a big deal in this area. There's people on the Wentz wagon. As a scout and as a former quarterback, what are your impressions of Carson Wentz?
So I told all my buddies this. One of my responsibilities in Indianapolis leading up to the draft, I would always do cross checks on the quarterback position, and I'd kind of stack our board, rank the quarterbacks, so to speak. And I told all my buddies leading up to the draft last year that I really like Wentz, that I thought he was the top quarterback in last year's draft. And I think the things you see in Wentz, he's a smart guy. He's tough. He's got all the intangibles. He's got the arm strength. He's athletic. So there's a lot of things for Philadelphia fans to be excited about. I think he's a great player. I think he's only going to get better. They did a lot to help him this offseason, putting some good pieces around him, some weapons, getting him some weapons in the passing game. So I think it's an exciting time for that Philadelphia offense. That'll be a lot for us to prepare for coming week one.
On the flip side, Brent, what about the quarterback that's on your team, which is Kirk Cousins? As a former quarterback as well, what are your impressions of Kirk Cousins? People forget he was overlooked. He was a fourth round pick. He was picked in the same year as Robert Griffin III. He was supposed to be the backup. Now he's the starter, and he's been the starter for a few years. So what are your impressions of Kirk Cousins, the quarterback?
I think he's handled his situation extremely well. He's every time he's gotten the opportunity, he's continued to prove himself. And he had a strong year last year, throwing for nearly 5,000 yards. He's a guy that moves the football up and down the field consistently. He works well in Jay Gruden's offensive system. He's a talented guy. He's a guy that you can win a lot of games with in the NFL. And I think you've seen that over the past couple of years. I hope he continues to grow. He's in a position to make a lot of money if he plays well this year. So it's exciting. There's a lot of incentive there for him to play well and perform well this season.
Brent Caprio is with us. He's a scouting assistant with the Washington Redskins. He's also a former scouting assistant and scout with the Indianapolis Colts. And, of course, on a local level, the quarterback of the Mainland Mustangs, the quarterback at the College of William and Mary. Brent, I always knew you were smarter than me, but when you not only went and got a bachelor's but then got a master's from William and Mary, it just confirmed it.
Thank you, Pete. I don't know. The study that came out today, the CTE study, is a little scary as a former player that has played for 16 years of my life. But I think I'm hanging on to my precious brain cells all right. I'm doing all right now.
Well, certainly, like you said, the only thing that some people may cringe a little at, see, and all this time I've known you, we're going on over a decade here, not one time did you ever let slip that you were a huge fan of the Washington Redskins. I just assumed that you bled eagle green like the rest of us, but now we know, now we've learned. But, yeah, you said it week 1, that's a 1 o'clock start time. That one's at Washington, and then on Monday Night Football. Boy, that'll be fun for you, right? Monday Night Football, October the 23rd.
Oh, yeah.
You'll spend your Monday before Halloween at Lincoln Financial Field, as that's an 8:30 ESPN start. Brent Caprio, the scouting assistant. Before we let you go, your folks have then just, tossed out all the Colts gear, and now they just have to dig out the old Redskins stuff? I mean, did they go crazy on eBay and Amazon and Fanatics to load up? I mean, what's the story here?
No, not quite yet. Not quite yet. My dad's birthday is coming up here in August, so that might be a part of his gift is some new Redskins gear. We need to update everything. But I pulled all my old stuff out of the attic and from underneath my bed where it was all hiding. The Colt stuff's in boxes. That's going up in the attic, and the Redskins stuff has been pulled back out. So it's an exciting time for my family. It's good to be a little bit closer to home and I'll be able to see them a lot more this year than I was able to in Indianapolis. So that's certainly on a personal level very exciting for me.
I mean, what was that interview like, though? So was the interview over the phone? Do you go down there? First there's some phone contact, then you go down and meet with them in person? And at what point are you trying not to, geek out and reveal your inner Redskin geekness in you? Or when you're like, stay calm, stay calmer? Or is that a plus where you try to reveal, look, I've actually been a fan of this team forever?
Yeah, they flew me down for an interview, and I had a couple other teams that I had interviewed with as well. And as soon as they offered me the job down here, I kind of tried to play it cool and say that I needed to call my parents and discuss it with them, and call the other teams that I've interviewed with and discuss with them. And, I think I called my dad 5 minutes later and I said, I think you know where my heart is, Dad. I grew up rooting for this team. So it was a pretty quick and easy decision for me when they offered me the job. It was very exciting for me.
You think someday we're going to be saying GM Brent Caprio?
I can only hope so. But that's a long way away. I just got to keep continuing to learn and grow, and hopefully be a part of some winning teams here. I'm 16-16 in my 2 years in Indianapolis, so I hope that I can get on the better side of 500 here this season.
And, of course, we wish you the best of luck, except for week 1 and week 7. That's when the Redskins play the Eagles. It's Brent Caprio, scouting assistant with the Washington Redskins, and we do hope we'll catch up with you at some point. We know how busy things get once you get into the season, so probably a lot of that will be done via text message. But we'll keep you on the back burner there, buddy, for maybe when those weeks come up, just to sort of get the litmus test and your feel on how things are going down there. Brent Caprio, thanks so much for joining us, pal.
Hey, thanks for having me on. Really enjoyed it.